Hello there, and a warm welcome to the Citizens Chat Show here on Civic Space TV. I'm your host, Judith Atim, and we're glad to have you join us. Today, we're discussing the violence against National Unity Platform Party supporters in Mbarara, but also generally campaign violence and the crisis in South Sudan. As you all know, these are quite two defining political crises in the region. One, of course, touches on the core of our domestic democratic processes, and the other threatening the fragile peace of our northern neighbor. First, of course, we're going to tackle the highly polarizing reports of violence against N.U.P supporters in Mbarara, a situation that pits the opposition's right to assemble against the security forces' mandate to maintain order. This will be the first focus of our conversation on the show, and I'm glad to be joined by my usual distinguished panelists, Dr. Robert Ojiambo, head of the History Department at Kyambongo University. A warm welcome to the show.
Thank you, Judith. Good evening, viewers, and good evening, my colleague panelists.
Honorable George Stephen Odongo, representing Uganda at the East African Legislative Assembly. Warm welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers.
Mr. Joseph Ochieno, political commentator and UPC Idelogue. Pleasure to have you on the show, Joseph.
Well, it's a pleasure to be hosted by you.
Thank you. And last but not least, retired Major Awich Pollar, Director for External Affairs at the NRM Secretariat, is also an advocate of the High Court and a human rights advocate. Warm welcome to the show, Major.
Thank you, Judith. Good evening to our viewers and good evening to my colleagues as well.
Of course, missing, as you can see, is Dr. Sarah Virete. Hopefully, she'll be joining us next week. So let's start with the issue of political violence or campaign violence. We've seen media coverage over the last several days dominated by reports of violence against National Unity Platform Party supporters in Mbarara. The reports have been quite jarring. The images, we've seen the reports of arrests, alleged brutalization of opposition supporters. And on the one hand, we also see security forces justifying their actions, citing provocation, public disorder, and the destruction of property. The National Unity Platform Party, through its leadership, contends that this is a deliberate strategy of intimidation. So, how, I'd just like by start looking at the season we're in. We're just a few weeks, I should say, to elections. And how do you think this kind of scenarios or environment impacts the morale of voters as we count down to the January 2026 elections, Dr. Ojiambo?
Yeah, Judith, thank you so much. Of course, this is good that it is coming up here because there had been a built narrative which I've been really struggling with, that the elections were very calm. And that narrative had become very popular. Every media was saying so. But remember, there is this rogue NRM police, which I don't know why they don't just declare themselves political and they go and do politics. Judith, if you remember, that whole saga started with the arrest of the likes of Eddie Mutwe and his group in Masaka, where it was alleged that they were in commotion and they had stolen a phone and funny things. Then they disappeared. They were shown on social media being shaved and taught to speak a certain language. That is the time this thing of police doing politics had started here. Then in the campaign trail, remember the attack of Bobby Wine's hotel in Lira. That's when it came out very openly. But remember, before that, Bobby Wine has been struggling with the police. Instead of concentrating on what he's going to tell the masses, he has been struggling with the police. The police is as if the whole traffic system of police turned on Bobby Wine to show him where to pass, because me, I thought that these roads in Uganda are public roads, and I am free to choose which road to pass on, and the job of police is to make sure that there is order on that road so that I can pass. You have seen Bobby Wine being guided to pass in bushes and small paths, people passing in people's gardens, and so many. You saw the biggest suffering was in Busoga. Then when he reached Lira, they started now arresting people. And I have seen, like the one of Lira, they said that the police was investigating on people who had stolen some of its property. And it was alleged that the police was tracking Bobby Wine and jamming some of his communication. Of course, the police later denied that, but again, there have been a controversy. Now, in Masaka, I mean, when they reached Mbarara, it was now, in fact, it started in this district where the Prime Minister comes from. I've forgotten, these names of the districts now in Uganda are very difficult, but where the Prime Minister comes from. Bobby Wine was supposed to have a rally in a certain venue. When he arrived there, he found a police helicopter had landed there, and the police had cordoned off the place, and they said, you cannot speak here. In fact, the orders allegedly had been given that Bobby Wine should not speak in Kakomiro. Now I have remembered the district. That should not speak there. And the Prime Minister was arguing that he has no supporters there. I don't know how the Prime Minister got to know whether all the supporters in Kakumiro are for only one candidate, and that is her candidate. Of course, the boys restrained themselves. I was very, very worried that if a scuffle ensued there, the police is armed, they have helicopter, they have members, they have all sorts of things. But they managed to restrain themselves and just passed on. Now, in the western region, in the district of Kiruhura, there he found people with the kiboko. People were armed with the canes, saying, just pass, don't even stop here. I thought a good police, if a police was for the Republic of Uganda, should have dealt with those people who had destroyed kiboko, because they are the ones who are obstructing campaign. It should have dealt with those ones. But police was there cheering them and protecting them, of course, until they went to Mbarara. In Mbarara, the rally had almost ended because this police came when N.U.P was already in the rally. The rally had almost ended. And these policemen allege that the people they rounded up, and when you see the charges they make against these people, is really flimsy. The really political agenda of NRA police, where they instead of charging people of issues which are keeping law and order, they say they were obstructing. Now this time they had not stolen anything. They were obstructing police work. But what did the police want to do in a rally? They wanted to march. Do they want to play a band? I don't understand. Now, yesterday in Kabale, what they did was to block the convoy of Bobby Wine, which was marching into Kabale. And I think the ones in Kabale were Uganda police, because at least when Bobby Wine came, they spoke to them and they left way and allowed them to go. These ones look like it was Uganda police. It was not the NRA police. So I think it is a very bad thing happening to our country. Politics should be left for politicians. The police should do its role of keeping law and order. UPDF should do its role of defending the country. And the judges, because judges, I have seen that even the judges are also now playing politics. Because when these people go there with these clumsy charges of theirs, the judges have become very, very strict to an extent that now almost in Uganda, bail is not allowed. I've been following this very closely. I hope they are not hearing the heed of their boss who had declared bail null and void. You remember the arrest of the Mufumbiros in Kawempe court, the kidnap of this lady in Nakawa. All these people have been taken to court, charged. When they reach a moment where they have to ask for bail, the legal system seems to be dilly-dallying and making sure that that does not exist. For me, I think, in general, Judith, the police, the UPDF of all forms, SFC, I don't know which one, I don't know which gangs, should do what they are supposed to do and leave politicians to do politics because we want a smooth political system. But I think this is the method that the NRA want to use this time.
Thank you, Dr. Ojiambo. Judge, let me come to you, Honorable. Time and again, of course, we see the same script play out. The security establishment sticking to the script of, we're trying to protect, to keep law and order, to enforce, to ensure there's peace, and so on. But ideally, how do you then think, or how should they differentiate between their mandate for, promoting and protecting peace, but also ensuring that they are not politically partisan?
Thank you very much, Judith. First of all, peace and security is neutral. So the conduct of our security forces should be within the parameters of the law, because the law is blind. And as long as the police are doing their work or the security forces are doing their work within the parameters of the law, then they don't need to struggle with whether or not this is political, because they are simply implementing the law. So really, I don't think that the police or any other security agency should be struggling to determine whether their actions are politically motivated or not. They should simply be looking at the actions of the individuals and be able to determine within the prescriptions of the law how they should handle such an individual. But because we are in a political environment and because this is now politics, any actions that security forces do will be interpreted in the context of our politics. Unfortunately, for a long time, there are political organizations that have made victimhood their brand. Even when situations are calm, they will try to provoke a situation where they become victims, because that's what gives them ground traction, unfortunately. And I think that's a very bad way of doing politics. Now, I heard my brother Ojiambo saying, if I am a political leader and I'm going to Kabale, for example, I choose whichever road I want to use. It is for the police to determine, to secure my. That's not the way it works. During the insurgency in the north, we used to be stopped at Karuma. And they will tell you, you are not going to proceed because the enemy forces are
On the road.
on the road. You wouldn't say that, for me, I don't care whether the enemy is on the road, let me just go. It's your duty as UPDF to secure me. No, because that's also part of security. So it is just political discipline that all the actors should abide by the regulations that are prescribed for these campaigns, but also to adhere to security regulations. For example, I have a friend of mine who works in Kitgum and told me that when Bobi Wine and his team arrived in Kitgum, they had secured a venue for their rallies. and had even done a route plan. Because you see, every presidential candidate presents their route.
Yes.
And then the police and other agencies work along those routes. And if they find there are areas that may interfere with public order, then they advise the presidential candidate, because that's their duty. Because you are a presidential candidate, not everybody along the route that you're taking is your supporter. Or you may be interfering with the peace of somebody else who may not be interested. So they look for the best possible route that allows for everybody to enjoy you, the candidate, enjoy their peace, enjoy their normal business. So in this case, in Kitgum, the presidential candidate of N.U.P decided that he will take his way and not the one that had been designated for the presidential candidate to pass. And he actually went through the streets of Kitgum and went through the markets and so on and so forth. You know, all of us, we are politicians. The optics matter. So we want to pass in areas that give us very good optics politically. And I think this is where sometimes those decisions are at variance with the security arrangements. And that is where there can be clashes. Because, you know, the duty of the police and the other agencies is to make sure they secure both the presidential campaigns, but also ordinary citizens who are going about their business. So they are conflicted, because at what point whom do you give precedence? Do you give precedence to public order, or do you give precedence to the presidential candidate? So this comes down to political discipline. And I'm saying this really in principle, because it's not just about N.U.P. It also happens with other political candidates who are contesting. Everybody wants to attract a lot of public sympathy, and they want to go to places where sometimes the police and the other security agents find difficulties in managing. Crowd control is not an easy thing, especially where people are agitated, politically excited. So it has a tendency of usually generating into or degenerating into clashes between the police and the ordinary one. That said, though, there is a limit to how much you can use force. And this is where I think that we need to call out that security agencies that are out there, the force that you use should be commensurate to the, level of disorder. Let me call it so. It is for the police to determine how much they use, how much force they use. But I have seen a lot of excesses, and I think we need to restrain ourselves as much as possible when we are dealing with public order, because in an attempt to cause public order, you could end up with a lot of fatalities, a lot of injuries, and it becomes very costly. So this is really where I have issues with the way we are managed. By the way, for just to make this point, Dr. Jambo here had said that for a long time there has been a narrative that the campaigns have been largely peaceful. And I want to say, yes, it is true that the campaigns have been largely peaceful. There has even been admission from the political candidates for a bigger part of the campaigns, that the campaigns have been largely very, very peaceful. In fact, where the candidates have followed the regulations, we have not had any problem. I can assure you, we have not had any problem. Where candidates have followed the regulations, where they have followed security advice on where the candidates should go and have their rallies and so on, we have had totally no problems. We have had problems only in areas where candidates have breached the provisions the regulations governing the conduct of the elections. That is where it has been, and that's why I said initially that if your stock of trade is victimhood, where it does not occur, you will try to create it. And it is the duty of our political leaders to make sure that we talk to our supporters to restrain themselves as much as possible and follow the guidelines and follow the regulations. I've seen huge crowds following Bobby Wine without any problem. In all this, you see huge crowds. By the way, have you ever seen, I want to ask you, this is a rhetorical question. Have you ever seen President Museveni, the political candidate of NRM, going in the streets, driving through the streets of these districts where the campaigns have been? Have you seen Museveni driving through Lira City? Have you seen Museveni driving through Gulu City? Have you seen him going through Arua City or something like that? He does not. There are designated places where he goes, and the people will go there. He addresses them, either it's a primary school or it's a, he addresses them from there and they leave. But there are particular candidates who simply want to go through the streets. And you know that our streets are business premises. People are doing businesses in those places. The police has a moral duty. It's within their mandate to protect those that are doing their businesses. Their job is not only to protect presidential candidates, but it's also to make sure that there is law and order.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Joseph, let me come to you. Like Joseph said, like Honorable George says, up till now, the campaigns have largely been peaceful, and this has been acknowledged on either side of the political divide. But what we saw in the last couple of days in Mbarara, to a lot of observers, is reminiscent of November 2020, Kalangala. Same script, same actors, different locations. What does this signal to Ugandans, but also other outsiders looking in, about a maturing democracy such as ours?
Maturing democracy? No. We are a struggling country trying to seek to establish democratic values amongst ourselves. And I really hope it happens, and I really hope we do so. And I really hope we do so within this generation. I always bore you guys when I take you guys back, but you'll bear with me. I was a first-time voter in 1980, and I'm trying to reflect on some of the observations made by George. We rode bicycles to locations, venues where rallies were going to take place. We walked a few journeys. And I remember the longest journey was a bicycle ride to Busolwe in Butaleja, where I did a lonely ride there. It is true that you went, you knew you made your 6 miles, 5 kilometers, 3 kilometers, to a location for a rally, participate in the rally, get excited, come back with flags and posters and things like that, and it's all fine. And I want to repeat, I never, ever saw violence, and don't recall any specific incident. Remember, I was young, and this would be normal around young people. Nor did I see police officers at the time. And remember, this was hardly 17 months after the fall of Idi Amin. We still have Tanzanian forces here. The country was still relatively, quote, not particularly stable. Mr. Museveni had already vowed that he was threatening to go to the bush. In fact, he was planning to go to the bush as dawn. In West Nile, Idi Amin guys were threatening from the Sudan, and West Nile was just still being pacified. That's 1980. When then I pull that back to where we are today and see what is taking place around election campaigns, and I see merely presence of security services, forget about violence or otherwise, I wonder, the way you started is it democracy? Sometimes I've even wondered, is it worth it? For the first time within the last 1 month, I've asked, are we really wasting time with this thing called democracy? Number two, I have been a participant in demonstrations and in involvement in crowds, and worked with the police, both here as a student and then abroad. You talk to the police, tell them your numbers, you agree locations, go to those spaces, and as leaders of this, you really don't want incidents to take place. No, do you really want to go against the law? So you mobilize and tell your people, take this route, come and be in these kind of places, and when it's over, you know it's over. But I found something very interesting from what George has just said, because I want to know if true, that the recent incidents have been primarily as a result of candidates, and this specific candidate here is N.U.P, and I think one incident in Torba that was slightly intra-opposition, where it has been arranged that candidate Chagulanyi say is in a particular, supposed to be in a particular location, address around a particular space, and he chooses otherwise. George, if that is the case, then the Electoral Commission and the security forces need urgent training on communication. Because that hasn't come across to me, because I have not got it as that. Because if it's as definitive as that, no, they need your advice. Because I don't know, because I don't think that's, the point is, it would appear that is not the issue, including on the reference of the issue in Mbarara. But I think where it's closer, George, is this where you bring to Mr. Museveni. Mr. Museveni is going to smile tonight, that Museveni goes to his location, because I'm giving him credit in a way, and NUP candidates goes along highways. Actually, if you do a critical analysis and take away emotions out of it, it sort of makes sense that if it has been agreed as part of the Electoral Commission provisions and designs that candidates should take to particular locations, then strictly you're saying that on your way to location XYZ, you turn a particular street corner into a location for a rally. You're effectively breaking the rules of the game, in which case you should be with issues of the Electoral Commission. What I expect of the Electoral Commission, less the security services, is to inform the public that you, candidate A, B, C, D, you're breaking the rules, you're breaking the law. And it's also true that if actually that's the arrangement that this guy should not supposed to be doing that as part of the process, you know, there is a case to be made. But then if that gets lost in the detail, then the remaining element of public perception is that the security services are targeting N.U.P supporters on this occasion. Now, if that then is the case, then it leaves us with an interesting question, that what about then other candidates? So that's why the attempt by George, the argument made by George is fairly tempting to me, this side of the argument, that actually, come to think of it, we've not had it about many other candidates. But of course, NUP guys would say that they're being targeted because they're the biggest opposition. Now, there has been an argument that NUP supporters are predominantly more likely to provoke. Again, I've argued that if they provoke, you know, deal with them in accordance with the law and offer them the results, you know, as it is. Is there an issue that political leaders in NUP are making a good use of public support and mixing this somewhere in between? I don't know. But whatever the case, bring security services, and I was on a television network elsewhere with a senior spokesperson for the police services, and we're having long conversations. It was to me very clear that the police's default position is of NUP as a problem, rather than them as law enforcement. Now that to me becomes rather difficult, to the extent that it's very difficult for someone who's not Ochieno, who tries to give a little bit of space for this, not to conclude that NUP members are being targeted. But again, what George said, and indeed Robert, that we had assigned the early part of this election process as relatively violent-free. I think it was, we did, I think even on this program, under the purely on the basis of evidence. And of course, I even boasted, I was trying to claim a medal that we campaigned so heavily to say that we wanted a violence-free election, that so be it.
Yeah.
To the extent that seemingly that changed just shortly before the parliamentary elections, unfortunately. So point is, I really hope that away from these recent incidents, and I really hope that if NUP leaders, and again, I'm giving them leads, NUP leaders, Electoral Commission and police, they really need to come out on this very particular, the issue that George has raised. They need to make this very specifically clear. Remember elections in January, so we still have time, and Ochieno is watching. So if it goes a particular angle, no, we shall hold you guys to account. Don't forget, a future UPC government, is holding you guys in the red book.
Well, thank you. I'll still come back to that, but let me first give Major a question. Major, you're the only military expert here in the room. And when we see, let's say, security experts, when we see these kinds of illegalities from our security establishment, brutalizing unarmed civilians who are simply exercising their political duties, there are questions about whether or not there are certain procedural gaps that exist, for example, in the training and maybe command structure, that perhaps lead to some of these irregularities or illegalities recurring time and again. But before you respond to that, George and Joseph, in your submission, I think you were also blinded to the fact that the example he gave earlier of the armed civilians armed with sticks charging at NUP supporters.
And the police is
And
just
police was
looking
actually just there looking
Actually, I forgot about
and
that, sorry.
supporting these people.
You need to comment on that.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
I wanted to hear that come. If maybe you could, Major, can we hear from you and then we come back to them? Yeah.
In fact, I have a number
No,
of
please,
things
yeah.
to
Okay,
respond.
fine. I find your question a little judgmental or conclusive because you are saying that the police officers are brutalizing people. So you have already investigated, you have judged, and concluded.
No, that's not what it is.
What did you say?
That's
The
not what I
allegations.
said. There are allegations.
I didn't hear the
And that's
Well,
watched on television.
No, I had mentioned it
happening.
earlier. I had already mentioned it much earlier at my
I didn't hear the
opening.
word allegation.
In my
You said
opening,
when you see
in my
they are
opening,
brutalizing.
yeah, but we've also
On
seen.
TV we
Yes,
are
we
seeing.
watch it also on
Well, but
TV.
that is
We
my
watch
comment.
these things happen.
That's my comment. Now, the whole thing, regardless of how you have put the question, which I must answer squarely, because your question is, you ask me with my expert opinion about the training,
Command
and
structure.
command structure, and even crowd control about this, which I must answer. But the bigger question, or the general thematic concern here, is violence.
Yes.
And I think violence, especially in political processes, can be physical assault, physical injury, or even detention. But we can also see that it can happen by the politicians and also by the state. Because we seem to be thinking that the perpetuators of violence are one-sided, only from the state. No, even political actors can do, even NUP, or even NRM can do it. So I think if we look at it from that broader perspective, that violence, in especially this political situation, is that intended action or even omission intended at another to cause pain. And that would be defined as violence. And we also need to say it is done by any actor. And before I had even said the political violence at this time, we NRM are the victims, not the perpetuator. So I wanted us to look at violence per se as at that. Now, what does the state say in their version? Maybe we haven't heard so much from the state. Police says that the political actors that they have been moving again have been in contravention of the law. And the laws during this season is one, to make sure that people speak to voters freely and peacefully, but also to protect other people in the course of this activity. It goes as far as during the voting itself. The law says, please let that vote peacefully. I think even the regulation prescribes the distance between the ballot box and the other people. And all these laws that they let the ballot box be 20 meters away from the people. And that's why it is ring fenced with a rope. All this is intended to make sure there's no violence and there's no confusion. So, in any of those legal provisions which is contained under Presidential Election Act or Parliamentary Election Act or local government, whatever, there's a package of laws that is expected to be followed. So, if it is not, it is and that's what the police are alleging. In real sense, I've also heard police saying that, but this would now mean how do you get in contact? Police is saying among the N.U.P, there are people who have something in their hands. They would come like they are talking, and when they punch you with something which carries grave injuries. And I think they have arrested people to that. There's even a video coverage which picked it, that the N.U.P people go with it in their hands, and they have been causing it as injuries against others. As to how those people come in contact for them to injure, I don't know, but they have said that. Now, so that's what the state's saying. And on the other hand, N.U.P is saying that we are moving in our procession and you are interfering. So I don't know whether the procession is within or outside the law when they move. So that is particularly their claim leading to violence. But I'd like to say here that under no circumstance should violence be allowed or prohibited, including us in NRM. We really, really condemn violence in the strongest way possible. Because in NRM, we have done our research and found out that if we don't have violence, or particularly against N.U.P leader, in the form of say prohibiting whatever they are doing or arresting them, or nobody knows. We did a research of just 10 people who are quite educated. Ask them the day Museveni was in Moses Ali's place. Says, excuse me, sir, where is Bobby Wine today campaigning? I don't know. Excuse me. Similar question to 10 people. Nobody knows. And then we ask the same question to the same people. Where is Museveni today? Oh, he has been in the Moses Ali district.
Where was that research done?
In Kampala, Nakasero.
Okay.
So people knew. Now, we realized that was a time when there was no friction between the state and Bobby Wine. So we realized that if you let N.U.P and Bobby Wine go smoothly,
it works to your advantage.
Yes. If Bobby Wine is beaten today in Mityana and people know tomorrow is going to Mubende, everybody knows, oh, yesterday he was beaten in Mityana and I think today is going to Mubende. So we really found that a peaceful election or a peaceful campaign works for us. So we therefore ask ourselves, where is the zeal, if so, as N.U.P alleges that they are being attacked without violation? Of course, this works differently if the state says there was violation of the law. Said, who has the zeal? Who is commanding? Because for us as NRM, we believe that as a party, we have the capacity to wrestle with any political actor. Wrestle with them in a sense that we have what the government has done in our past mandate. We have what we are doing at the moment, and we are capable to explain to the voters, and the voters are with us. In fact, we have predicted the least we can do is 70% win in this election. So we haven't called for reinforcement from anybody. So for us, we are saying, let there be a violent, free election. Now, maybe I did not watch clearly. I read something from Chairman NRM Kirihura. He's saying it is the N.U.P people who attacked and went into looting things and all that, but that is his version. I don't know the version according to N.U.P, because for me as a lawyer, you need to listen to both sides. But I wouldn't want...
So their side is that as they were heading to Chiruhura, they found locals lining up on the sides of the roads with sticks,
That is
charging
what
at
I
them.
wanted
Yes,
to say. The
that was
sticks.
on their side.
The
Yeah.
sticks, for those who may not be aware, in cattle corridor, don't be misled by sticks.
If the stick is being
everybody has
used
a
at
stick.
you, yes.
Even Tanga Odoi one time went there during the NRM primary.
And now has a
Tanga
stick.
was shocked because the whole village is carrying sticks. Even under in a border, people are running on a border with sticks. In fact, those who have come to Kampala, even in their cars, they are sticks.
Judith.
So,
Judith.
Just a minute.
you will have your chance.
Just a minute. No, just a minute.
How?
Just a minute.
There's so many pains
Everyone
I
is going
carried
to
when
no.
you are speaking.
He's
I had
going
my
to speak,
notebook.
and then we are going
With
to
the
also hear
heartbeat, I had
from
to note it down.
Honorable George
So-
and him, and then we'll come back to
So,
you. Just a minute.
therefore, I just want any person, including Professor tomorrow, if you interface, including primary election of NRM, don't be over judgmental in the appearance of sticks in Nyamshozi and Kazu. It's a day to day. Even in churches, they have sticks, even in churches. Everywhere they have sticks. So I would be rather surprised. I would be rather surprised if N.U.P passed Nyamshozi and people were lining up without sticks. I would be very surprised.
They
I
were
would actually
lining
think
up-
they are not from Nyamshozi.
They were lining up with
I would
sticks,
think they are not
pointing
from
at them
Nyamshozi.
and threatening actually to
Those
attack
sticks
them
are
with those
always
sticks.
there.
Yeah, but for threatening people?
Those
For
sticks are-
herding animals,
no,
not for
they're
threatening
for herding
people.
animals, and
Yes.
you can mistake it, and they go with it even to churches. Anyway, unless it is used for assault, but those sticks are there, so you don't read into it.
Except when you're threatened
If they
verbally
were,
and physically.
And I repeat, if they were in Nyamshozi, lying on the road, and they didn't have sticks, I would think they were brought from Rakai or somewhere. But any Nyamshozi person has a stick. Now, the calmness of the election, colleagues have mentioned that it is started well. It is started well. And some of us, like the Congress is saying, we thought it was our repetitive call to the public, our repetitive call to the actors, including the state, and particularly from NRM. We started making this call from Kawempe South election. We said, but who has called you in? We are a party competent of wrestling. Okay? And if we lose in an area which we thought was hostile like Kawempe, so be it. One position in a nearly 80% dominated NRM, we didn't take offense. You can take, in fact, you can take five more constituencies. That would still be inconsequential to NRM, in as far as it will not impact or affect our ability to pass a law, our ability to pass a resolution in parliament, our ability to do anything in parliament. We still have the position. So we were taking Kawempe South with a normal contest.
North, Kawempe North.
Okay. Yes, with a normal contest, Kawempe North. So, but we kept on making this call. And maybe it was one of the joint call that we had a common voice with my friends from Congress and all others. We are calling for a peaceful election. And we know a violent election, especially against N.U.P, works against us. We don't want it. And surprisingly to my colleagues, some of my colleagues, when Mao said this election was going to be calm, some of them were actually annoyed that why should it be calm? I mean, they cast Mao not because they were saying Mao is lying, it won't to be calm, but because Mao wants it calm. How can election be calm? No. We want a non-calm election.
No. Major, I think you're twisting things and you're misinterpreting.
Yes.
Let's look at the broader context of Mao's statement. When he said these elections will be very calm, but also there were other statements accompanying that. The decisions for the transition of this country, the conversations about the transition of leadership are already being held in certain rooms where certain actors are not part of it. That, I think, was what perhaps inflamed Ugandans even most, not about the calmness of the election.
No, but me, the persons or the people that I had opposite were opposing it only to the effect that why should election become?
Thank you.
So, for us, we are still, it is not too late, not all is lost. We have had discussions as a party. We had a talk on, we had a meeting rather in Umbale for top management of NRM, which is the highest management level of the party. We still dissociated ourselves with the violence, and we still called on for a peaceful campaign leading to a peaceful election. That is our position, and we want it that way.
Thank you very much. George, then you wanted to make a rebuttal.
On
Doctor.
both of us.
You see, Judith, as a student of politics, I pick it from, you see dictators in Africa, the current dictators in Africa. And I say this without fear. President Museveni is one of them, have come up with the new forms of dictatorship. They are not like Bokassa, Kamozubanda, and those early dictators of post-colonial governments. These have accepted democracy, but democracy in their own terms. And for the first thing they deal with is communication. They have very good communicators, people who can twist things. Even where somebody has died, they said that one was just sleeping. Was sleeping, did not die. If he died, where did they bury him? Where did they bury him? Can you show us the grave?
Then you
So that is the first area they work on. For example, this peace here, they can create peace or insecurity if they want. And it can be through narratives. For example, my colleague here was saying that when they were going to northern Uganda during the insurgency, they would stop and people move in convoy and so on. That one, everybody could understand. There is an insurgency in northern Uganda. Therefore, you cannot allow people just to go and enter an ambush of LRA or those bandits who are there and they are killed. In Uganda now, we don't have any insurgency that has been declared. Police can only control movements when there is an insurgency or when there is a state of emergency. Without that, they are just supposed to monitor and guide and pick out the bad elements and take them before court. In fact, the reason why we declare a state of emergency is to give police and other security operations to be in charge of movements. We don't have one. The other thing, which is very true of a dictator, is that dictators always organize elections, but they organize elections which they must win. And therefore, how do you win? Dictators fear masses, and they fear masses which are opposed to them. And therefore, how do you disperse those masses in most cases? Number one is to create fear. Why are they targeting Bobi Wine's rallies? Because Bobi Wine rallies have somehow pulled crowds. They did not expect that. For example, in Mbarara, they did not expect that in Mbarara, an opposition-leaning candidate.
Not opposition-leaning, an opposition candidate.
No,
it's,
right
it's not
now,
just leaning.
you see, for me, in my language, during election, there is no opposition. Because opposition only happens when an election has already been done and one party wins, it goes to the right, and another one which lost and has the majority goes to the left. That's how opposition is formed. During election, all these people are candidates.
But
they are vying for the position.
Now there's a government. There's no.
There is no.
Is there a vacuum?
The opposition will be in government, in parliament, not during candidates. Otherwise, if you went to electoral commission now, there are people who have registered as opposition. They are candidates. No, NRA, I don't know which one. There is no opposition. Okay, so that language also is the language of the dictator. The language of the dictator. So the dictator, secondly, I told you, fear creates a lot of fears crowds, and this fear is now to threaten people, because if people are committing offenses, why do you round them up? And you start continuing to tell us, the election is very peaceful. 100 people are already in jail. 100, they are jailed. They are, and they don't arrest them in the normal police arrest. Some disappear. Like, for example, I was just reading the ones of Mbarara. They were arrested in Mbarara. Some are charged in Mbarara. Some are taken to Chiruhura. Some are brought to Kampala in Nabweru here. Why do you bring a person who committed an offense in Mbarara, in Nabweru, if it is not to create fear and terror on these people? If you watched very well, recently, candidate Museveni was in Mbale. They went to do big schools in Mbale, 2 huge schools, Nkoma SS and Mbale SS. They are very huge schools. In fact, comparable to Kolo SS. They distributed T-shirts to school children, and the school children were running in the whole of the city. The only thing that surprised them, and I think those young men are very good, instead of chanting the candidate whom they were putting the T-shirt on, they were chanting the opposition one. So the police was confused. Do we arrest these ones or we do what? Because they are putting on yellow of Museveni, but chanting Bobby one, people power. And you see, this is confusion. And for me, that's why I want this country to be sane. How can electoral commission see this and they just keep quiet? A candidate goes to a school and dresses school children, a whole school, in a jersey or a T-shirt of another candidate. These children are supposed not to be partisan. They are minors. Yeah. So for me, that's what police should be dealing with. You don't hear anything about them. Finally,
we have very few minutes to end this session.
My friend here was talking about some people. Of course, that one of the stick is colleagues. It's a lie. That one is a joke. Take it as a joke. Those are the comical alley lies that people come up with here. Because somebody who is carrying a stick in the Hima tradition and another one who is running on the street chasing people are 2 different people. The ones who are watching on TV are 2 different people. So saying that Bahima or people from Nyabusozi, it is their character to run around with the sticks is an insult to them. They keep sticks, but they don't chase people with the sticks anyhow. That one should be ignored. Finally, what I wanted to answer, that you see some people benefit from violence, for sure. That is also to abuse somebody. And that is the thing that has been used against Besigye all through his political career. That for him, he looks for, when they have boxed his nose, they have pepper sprayed his eyes, they say that is how he benefits. He benefits from that. And that has also been propagated by these flowery spokespeople of NRM to make people believe that somebody can be there to be beaten, to be tortured, and that's how he gains. It is impossible.
Doctor,
I think that should not be allowed, and that type of narrative should be taken to the limit.
Thank you, Honorable.
Judy.
We're talking about the penkoni, the sticks.
All that, I'm going to talk about all that. But you see, when we come to this show, and unless you in the future say so and so will be a spokesperson of the opposition and so will be a spokesperson of NRM, I am not here in the position of spokesperson of NRM. And neither is Ojiambo here as a spokesperson of N.U.P. So we need, first of all, to decolorize so that we can look at
the issues objectively.
The issues and call them out. I'm on this show and it's on record when there was violence in Kawempe.
Yeah.
And I put it very clearly that violence does not serve the interests of NRM. Neither does it serve the interests of the country. And violence has no space, has no place completely in our politics. So we should do everything within our means to make sure that we remove violence as part of the character of our politics. And also when I made reference to the fact that, during the NRA time, I mean, when not NRA, LRA were stopped at Karoma, it was simply because I was responding to what Dr. Jamba had initially said, that, you know, the police have no business telling me not to use certain routes, yeah? Because I know that that is not, you don't break the law by going through, but there are regulations. The law comes with regulations, and there are those institutions that are mandated to come up with regulations, like the Electoral Commission. They regulate the conduct of our elections within the presence of the law, the Elections Act. And everybody should be bound by those regulations. Now, let me be clear that violent acts that have been associated with the NRM, those that you said, or you know, allegedly that there were people who were seen running with sticks, and there were NRM supporters attacking N.U.P. That has no place in our elections. And really, the police should be going out to look for all those people who are seen. If at all there is evidence that has been produced, the police should get interested in those that are propagating violence in our elections. There is no space for that. We have said it time and again, and I'm happy that Major here made it very clear that, you know, NRM has the infrastructure on the ground to mobilize support and vote and defeat any candidate in the race. You don't need violence. You don't actually need violence for it. So there is no need for there is nothing that NRM benefits from violence. They should leave. If N.U.P supporters want to have a rally, let them have a rally. What I'm simply saying is that they should follow the law. Nobody should be above the law. The regulations are there. They have been the electoral. That's why we have an electoral body. The referee is always there. So if the law is there and there are regulations that govern the elections, let all the candidates follow those regulations. I want to condemn in the strongest terms possible the actions of those who allegedly picked up sticks and went to assault N.U.P supporters. We have no place for that. Today is N.U.P, tomorrow is NRM. We have seen that. Tomorrow you are NRM, another day you are N.U.P. We have also seen that. So all of us are one and the same. We are looking for the best, in the best interest of the country, except that we are, each one of us is persuaded differently. So there are those who feel the N.U.P candidate represents their interests. Let them follow their candidate. Those of you who are supporting NRM, follow NRM, but don't go there fighting N.U.P people physically and think that that is the way to gain votes. No, neither should N.U.P people be attacking NRM people, because that's not the way we should be conducting business as a country.
Thank you. Joseph.
Judith, I have told the police, and I say it again, and I've told 2 police chiefs in the recent few years, just as they changed, that police need not behave the way they do. And just like George says, that these things will catch up with all of us Ugandan citizens. And some of you guys are lucky because you're following, some people following, some people in a very funny way, but people who are in the late evening of their lives. But you know, for me, I'm in the early afternoon of my life. So we are still around here sometime. So these things will catch up with you. 2, I gave a long session, you know, that's part of my problem. Sometimes maybe I talk too much, secrets, you know. I have, Dr. Jamba, I have given free, very deep, quality, heavy, expensive advice to some of these guys. In many of these cases, in crowd control and managing so-called anticipated things, we remember, use intelligence-led policing. Like George is saying, unless you guys are telling us a lie, these guys have good capacity, you know, to organize and mobilize and prepare for a rally, for a demonstration in Kampala of 100,000. Because if these guys can't manage a demonstration in Kampala of 1 million people, then these guys have no capacity to hold Uganda should we be invaded by even mere overzealous South Sudan. So we should be able to have capacity to be able to do so. So just apply that, and you apply that, you'll get my support. So why take these extremes? Whatever the matters, whatever the circumstances. And so, in as long as it is that, the view remains as of today that the police is partisan, the police picks and chooses. And the best example is the question raised about Mbarara, which I saw the clips about. I defended NRA on allowing students to go to rallies. By the way, Judith, they don't have to be 18. Museveni came and bored me in Mwiri with the senior ones. DP came. I was persuaded in Mwiri when I joined UPC. I was 17, 18, we're turning 18. So it's okay, actually. It's actually politically very okay for us to engage young people in politics. It's basically the manners we show them. So young students going to a rally is not a problem, and the UPC would not object to that. The issue is that if you're going to a rally in Nkoma, let all candidates be allowed access to those students and pupils. T-shirts, I think that was not one which I would agree. In fact, they should not be allowed. So the problem then was T-shirts, and that was wrong. And then number 3, perception, but almost certainly reality, that these guys were being sent to fill in this and to pump support for a particular candidate. And I wonder, had there been candidate, some of these candidates, I don't know their names, and I don't know the political organizations they represent. But for argument's sake, had it been candidate Chagulanyi, in Bale, and they were doing that, would it have been allowed? And would the authorities allow that? That is the challenge, and that's the question. I know it's almost certainly not the case. Quickly then, this obnoxious thing in Kirihura is absolutely objectionable. The idea that particular communities in this country, and I want to call out candidate Museveni. Can I? Because he's the president of this country. Mm-hmm. He's the lead candidate in this case, and is the contestant who brought us all this other mess before. I think leadership must be provided, because the intonations there is nasty tribalistic. Now, whether you like it or not, whichever way you show it, basically this is Kirihura, don't go, you guys are not allowed. And I think it's actually quite nasty. But I'm sorry, I don't have to say that. Almost like the conversation you take to Luwera and simply say, don't come here, kind of stuff. I don't think we should be able to allow those kind of things this day and age. But another element to this is this. This sticky thing. I know Comrade Rich and I have had conversations elsewhere about the stick. The Bahima enjoy their stick. But these guys apparently, they will rarely not even touch their cows with a stick. So how dare they use their stick against human citizens in this country? That's actually quite insulting. So it tells something cruelly wrong, and it must be condemned. And like George said, I hope, George, that people listen to you, that these people who've been on camera, Dr. Jambo, with these sticks taunting people, police must pursue these people, because this is an early stage of the election process. It is really trying to say politics of them versus us, and so politics should not be applying and playing this day and age. Thank
you. Major will come back to you after the break. So it's time for us to take a break right now. And then when we return, we'll hear, of course, from Major. We're still talking about the violence against N.U.P supporters in Mbarara. But shortly after that, we'll, of course, shift focus to the explosive political situation that has been unfolding in South Sudan. That's after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and we're glad that you're still with us here on the Citizens Chat Show. We continue with our conversation on the violence against N.U.P supporters in Mbarara during these campaigns and generally campaign violence. And shortly after that, we'll pivot, of course, to South Sudan, where we will critically analyze the exploding political tension over there. For now, Major, let's come back to you in just a very few minutes, and then we move to other issues.
Yes, I will say a few things about the violence, but also on a small matter that came up. Maybe my input would help to put our perspective and how we see how it should go. First of all, of course, my doctor friend said that in response to the stakes, which had asserted that for anybody to line up in a Rachitora or Kirihora district, he will of necessity have a stake. But as Comrade Odongo put it, if that stake, or even doctor himself, is that stake is used for something else, then that is abuse. But my point was that any lining up in Kirihora, everybody will have a stake. Everybody. If they line up they didn't have, then they are not from Kirihora. Possibly they are brought from Tororo, where there are no cows.
That one is
Where there are no cows.
Many cows from Toro were taken from Kirihora.
To
people,
the extent that even in an
1987.
internal election, or Tanga Doi thought he was being assaulted. They told him, no, this is a normal way of life here. And therefore, if CNN or Al Jazeera was to pick it, they would actually report that everybody in the district had come with the sticks to assault, which is not the case. So I really want to interpret that position. But of course, doctor says I was being chemical early. How I wish that doctor in a normal culture...
No, I withdraw that statement.
In a normal culture... Thank you for withdrawing.
I withdraw that one.
In a normal cultural debate, a culture debate, when I put my idea, go for it. Don't go for me. Like you said, you said somebody has died, and I deny. You go for what I've denied. For example, in law, for us, if you came to court and said my husband who was charged is dead, the court will ask you, bring death certificate. So we want to act emotional. Oh, he has died. Bring death certificate. So rather than saying I'm lying, you rather do that, because that would be personal. And of course, sometimes in the past, when you used to debate in secondary, you'd attack your friend and people will clap and you'll feel so happy because you have attacked. But the saying is that big minds don't discuss people. You leave the person, however stupid, just correct his ideas. So some of us would hear personal attack and maybe just clean it and say, oh, you're attacking. Okay, just move on. So it is quite not nice. I put my idea, go for my idea, don't go for my head, however stupid I am. Just say, correct that. So I like to say and leave that at that. So big minds talk ideas or philosophy, not people. Now, still on our session, and which was corroborated by Comrade Odongo, that when we go for violence, it works against us. And also that some people get more publicity. We still want to ascertain that position, because this is based on simple research. And somebody can do it again tomorrow. take a week without any police interference with Bobby Wine and ask where Bobby Wine is and tell me how many people know where he is. But wait for alkanation and arrest and all this and ask everybody to know. This is simple. It is not rocket science. And that is why for us in the party we are saying, please don't let Bobby Wine talk to his people. We are also capable of talking. People will decide in the ballot box. So we still maintain that position, that it works against us. Now, about the children putting on T-shirts, I was in Umbale, but I was not involved in that operation, so to say. But maybe I state how we do it or how I did it. And it can now help us to know how children should or should not have been involved. But first of all, concur under children's rights. Children have a right to receive political ideas. It is their right. And it is them to process it. But what we do, and in my case, what I did, because Museveni's campaign started in my area, we have zoned ourselves in the Secretariat. Each director or a member of election commission or chairman has an area. I've been given the area of Lango because we know that our work is mobilization. So even if you're a director medical, here you must have an area. A director legal has Bunyoro. So what happens is, when Museveni started with me, I go to a district like Amolata. I deploy public address system in the districts to tell people our candidate is coming. Please come. Then every district, thanks to NRM, there's a radio station in nearly every district. So we go to the radio station, talk to people, even past midnight. The following morning, I leave to God. In that, whoever will come, will come. Why we do this is sometimes there is this issue of transporting people, which I must make it clear. We transport people. Why? Because Election Commission has given every 8 of the 8 candidates a district per day. Therefore, it is upon you, the candidate, to say, I've gone to a Mudat district. How will I make sure all the people at Mudat hear me? If you have the logistics, you will gather as many as possible. So the people we transport, because they could find 30 sub-counties or so many. So we have to pick from as far as possible, especially opinion leaders who will lead. So we do that. But, so this is how it works. Now, my colleagues have been zoned in Umbale. I don't know, I need to inquire into the distribution of T-shirts to children and all that. It never occurred in my area of jurisdiction. But what we do is go to the district, publish as much as possible. Bring party leaders to hear the candidate. Go on the radio, talk yourself silly. Leave to God, whoever will come. And people trickle in. People start trickling in, and my candidate talks, and I'm done for that district.
On the issue of transporting people, Major, I'd just like some clarity from you. We've seen accidents happen in some instances where people that have been reportedly transported to go and attend rallies in some parts of the country have been injured and so on. How is the party handling this?
Where we have had injuries, we have treated them, and we have made their welfare good. We have not had litigation because these are party members who came voluntarily. So those who have been involved, we have treated them and we have given them some support in one way or another, and it has never been a legal matter. We do transport, as I said. For example, if you have a geography of Otuke, in Otuke headquarters is near Karamoja, but the other part of Otuke is deep near Padre, near that bridge of Puranga. So you have to transport. Now you expect your candidate to listen, candidates from near Padre, to listen to a candidate speaking for somebody from Padre, the corner of Padre, listening up to Karamoja. So we feel that because we mobilize ourselves and organize ourselves, we transport them. At least opinion leaders, party leaders from Paris level, said you come and we take them. So accidents do happen. It has happened once or twice, but also like in Ojiambo, it rained and people ran on top of the what did you call it, pavilion, the podium. People ran on top of the podium. Others ran behind, and the thing collapsed on people because it had rained and there was nowhere to shelter. So we have had that, but we have been able to manage it. That time it was in my jurisdiction, so I took them to the hospital and treated them. So therefore, I want to take leave of this violence thing to say the law should be followed, but also all actors must act responsibly. Our political party, good enough, we have not been implicated as NRM to perpetuate it. But we need to act, like I told you, in our top management. We talked not of this, and we insisted that we want to come out clear as a party. We want a peaceful campaign with a peaceful ending. And we also want to call on the state that the state should really act responsibly to protect the law and order. Otherwise, nothing will save us, for us as NRM, in the procedural piece itself, not to make our adversary gain advantage, but also in the general legitimacy, as the world will look at us. It would not help us to go with violence, end up voting, and claim victory, when all the world are looking at you like you're not serious. So we really want a peaceful and a non-violent election campaign and election.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's now shift our focus to the regional crisis that is unfolding before our eyes in our neighbor, South Sudan. Wednesday was quite a tense day, if you were following the news. President Salva Kiir dismissed his vice president, Dr. Benjamin Bolmel, along with key economic allies, including the central bank governor, the head of the revenue authority. It's been quite a lot going on there. And I want us to, of course, I think I'll start with you, George, because you sit at the EAC, you have these conversations at a regional level. So we want to benefit from that regional perspective. We know that Bolmel also rose quite rapidly through the ranks. He was a sanctioned businessman. He moved to VP. First Deputy SPLM Chairman, a full general in the NSS. He was also widely seen as Salva Kiir's favorite successor. But also his downfall in less than 24 hours was equally swift and quite huge. In just a matter of hours, he was stripped of his party, state, and military authority. And of course, it brings us to the question of the internal power dynamics within the ruling SPLM. George, if you could just give us some insight into what's going on. We also understand that this is not just something that's happening today. There's also been a sustained tension that has been simmering over a period of time.
Yeah,
George, how many vice presidents are there?
5?
There were supposed to be 5.
there are 5.
Now there are 3.
Yeah. So the first of all, what happened yesterday? It's difficult to comment about it because we haven't got the details, the specifics. So it's very premature to even delve into the discussing what happened yesterday. But I think, as you said, it points to broader political issues within the Republic of South Sudan that has been protracted for some time now. It has been protracted. You know, the South Sudan is still struggling with building a consensus. There is no national consensus. So what we see is that there is a lot of powers that are vested in the presidency, and because the president enjoys a lot of those powers, he seems to be now the only center of stability, if I could say so. South Sudan needs our prayers, because for a long time there are conversations about how to build a credible, legitimate, and robust state. You see, in the absence of a legitimate and credible state, there is bound to be tensions. In the case of South Sudan, South Sudan is still haunted by, is still held hostage by the death of their leader, John Garang, who died prematurely. And I think at the time there was general consensus that he was the leader of, and was bound to be the one who would lead South Sudan into independence, and and provide leadership, and therefore later transition. That didn't happen. So South Sudan is grappling with tendencies that emerged within the SPLM, and those tendencies have been sustained up to date. That's why, as we speak, you have a former vice president who is still in under house arrest. That is Riek Machar. And then you have all these vice presidents that have been picked from different
states.
So what would ordinarily be a state has become a tribal coalition. A coalition of different tribal ethnic groupings. It's an attempt to bring them together, because their strongest tool or means of organizing is through ethnic identities. So they have not built a credible national army, national institutions. All of them have aligned to individuals, or to particular, kingpins within their ethnic groups. Now, that is a very difficult thing to deal with. And what you see happening in South Sudan now is a struggle for transition. It is, Ball was until yesterday seen as the heir apparent. It was the standby generator for South Sudan. But we do not know what happened. The details are very scanty.
So you've not, you will still receive an official communication?
We haven't received any official communication. And it would be very speculative for me to begin to assert that this could be the motivation behind what happened yesterday. But it's an indication of a turbulent, because you see, if you look at it carefully, you will see that the governor of Bank of Republic of South Sudan just lasted less than 2 years, the former governor. In fact, and then the Minister of Finance was was replaced 2 months back. And that has been, they have had like 6 governors within a period of 2 years. They have had, I don't know how many ministers of finance in a period of, so there has been really, it has been such a very...
it's not just a political situation, but equally the economic situation is equally bad.
Is dire. And actually, when you talk about the economic situation of South Sudan, you can see that recently their embassy had to close in
Nairobi.
In Nairobi, essentially because they are not paid rent for some time. They are not compliant with their subscription to the East African community. They are actually the biggest
debtors.
They have up to over $20 million yet to be paid to, actually about $27 to $30 million yet to be paid to the EAC. So you can see that they are struggling economically, and the politics is not healthy enough. So we all need to pray for South Sudan, and where possible, we need really the EAC to come up and have a conversation around stabilization of South Sudan.
Dr. Ojiambo, what's your reading of all these tensions that we are seeing, also from a historical perspective? Because you're a historian.
You know, South Sudan is a very unique country in Africa. A country which was born getting its independence from another state. And the argument then was the struggle between the Arab versus the black community in South Sudan, or if you want, Muslim and the Christian communities in southern part of Sudan. Of course, this struggle started very early in time, and you remember Nyerere was against it, and he used to preach against it, and he even foresaw the things happening, saying today it is Arabs and Africans, tomorrow it is going to be Dinka versus Nue or the other, or Christian who is American-oriented and Christian who is Anglican-oriented, and therefore it will never solve the problem of Africa. But because of the geopolitics of the time, people thought that that was the best decision. So the government went on up to 2019. 2019, there was a lot of factions, and of course the major players have always been Salva Kiir and Dr. Machar, but during that time, other players also came in, and that's how Ball came in with his own faction. Now, there is always a metamorphosis in the SPLM movement. And because of that, every time there is some struggle, the SPLM keeps growing, and when it grows, it comes up with a lot of problems. Remember, when this Ball and his team came up, there was a preparation for elections. You see, South Sudan has even failed to organize elections because they really think that elections could disintegrate the country. So there was a lot of conflict, ethnic-based, and even within the SPLM, there were problems. So it was thought that they form a government of national unity. And that government of national unity, General Kiir remained the leader, and there were 5 vice presidents, Ball being one of them. Ball is a man of very many characters. He's a politician, he's a soldier, he's a businessman, he's a diplomat, and many other things. So he has been a very huge threat to Kiir recently. But you see, Kiir has a character of a typical old man. A typical old man develops a lot of fear, and that fear is what keeps them. And they deal with the fear sort of reactionary. And I think those days it used to be Kiir, Riek Machar, who used to be his major threat. But now there are so many threats to an extent that even Rebecca one time was a threat to him. He was fearing. That's why, by the way, Rebecca is one of the vice presidents. One of the vice presidents. So I really see South Sudan having a characteristics of many African countries.
For the viewers, we need to know Rebecca Nyandeng.
Nyandeng.
She's one of the vice presidents.
Yeah.
Wife of Garang.
Yes. Of course, we should not confuse him with another Deng. There is another Deng who is also a vice president. This one is Nyandeng. Thank you, Honorable. So for starters, this is where Africans were in 1960s, whereby you have just gotten independence, and after independence, there is a battle to put the country together. And that's why you see many countries in Africa. In Nigeria, there were I don't know how many coups. In Ghana, there was a coup that chased away Nkrumah. in many of these countries, including Uganda, because there was that struggle to try and put the country together. And therefore, there is a ethnic and other forces, international forces that were in play. By that time, it was mainly Cold War that was precipitating most of these problems. But for South Sudan, it has been mainly due to their own weaknesses. The weaknesses are in that many of the factions that come up do not come up with the real issues that they can put on paper and maybe come up with a document that people go with at home. What it has been is that when somebody makes noise and becomes sort of a threat, he's given something. And that's how Ball, as my colleague told you, rose very quickly because he looked a threat. And therefore, he would be promoted, then given this until he reached vice president. Now it has reached a time for him to collapse. But for me, I really see that this South Sudan issue is just we are just postponing problems. I tend to think that something needs to happen for once, and these people disorganize themselves, then they are reorganized because we are just postponing. You remember there's a time.
But there's been a series of breakdown in South Sudan for a very, very
Yeah,
long time.
there is a time when
2012, 2013,
2016.
2016.
Yes.
Yes. So what worst thing do you think should actually happen?
No, for me, I've always argued, and people think that I am funny. We need to leave South Sudan to erupt. And when it erupts, the strong man, another strong man who is not Salva Kiir or a community or groups of people will emerge. And when they emerge, they will create order. Because what we are now dealing with is artificial. Is artificial. There's a time when even its security could not hold. The neighboring countries had to send their security to keep this country. Do we want to say that then we are going to colonize it, or some strong countries should colonize it and reorganize it? May I think no. We need to leave them like they used to leave us when we were young. We fight. After fighting, we discover who is strong amongst us, and the state is formed from that.
Joseph, do you subscribe to the school of thought that South Sudan should be left to its own devices, left to fully disintegrate or explode and handle its issues internally? Or do you think there has to be that continuous intervention from external actors, the EAC, IGAD, etc. But also we've seen these groups, these bodies intervene time and again. What should or what can be done differently?
Obviously, they're two-pronged questions. The first part of it is commonsensically obviously not, because logically we can't. And I don't know whether it was discussed earlier or during earlier break. But in any case, if we were being presumptive in terms of looking to the future, if we were here 20 years ago, it's a conversation perhaps we would have had, but maybe 20 years ago we wouldn't, because Garang was there. South Sudan is amazingly, actually, Africa's greatest tragedy. Because it's the newest nation, but it's actually almost a nominally non-functioning state in every sense. It is almost certainly a property of an individual with groups of individuals backed by a few neighbors with interests. Guys who, like George, I think, says that, these guys are major defaulters at EAC and other agencies over millions of US dollars. But we know that particularly individual leaders in South Sudan trade in dollars and carry possibly millions of US dollars in their cars. So that is the state of play in that nation state called South Sudan. Should it really have been a viable nation state? I think Dr. Ojiambo was referring to Julius Nyerere's positioning, and I think whereas it would be surprising to some others that Nyerere might have a different the view that he held. The issue then was whether or not, as we're breaking up as East African nation states or small regional groupings, looking towards the creation of the major one nation state Africa, whatever tiny little states that we're having, that we're breaking up, we're not being counterproductive to that. I think in a way, That was part of the argument. There was no reason for us to break up the Sudan, but rather strengthen the diversity of that country, because in any case, we're preparing ourselves to become the diverse one strong government of Africa, or in a very likely case that then Sudan joined East Africa, we're a bigger regional bloc. I was a party to the liberation of Southern Sudan in many ways. One of the biggest, and I think through this program, was the fact that leading George to these guys nearly coming to that consensus agreement which saw John Garang join these guys go to Khartoum as a government. The huge amount of expectations from South Sudanese was so much that these guys were even laughing at us, other East Africans. They promised us they would show us what it is to govern a nation state. When unfortunately, of course, the pillar of South Sudan, John Garang, fell in that tragedy, the shocking thing is that South Sudan was exposed that it was not a nation state, but an amalgam of communities, but with very much interesting states, because some of those sub-regional states in South Sudan, Judy, maybe if you look at those tiny little states, they're actually very sophisticated in their own way. But I think something is cursing this community, that at the center is an absence of a pillar, a zero in Luo, since once in a while people throw these things, to basically ensure that this thing called the new nation state, South Sudan, actually happens. Mm-hmm. After Garang goes, and this to me is shocking, as I said, they're competent South Sudanese. And as George was talking, I was wondering, the competent South Sudanese. But I say, what is it? And maybe this is an important thing for Africans, other Africans, and even here in Uganda, where sometimes we're almost locked to the possibility, it's not a diversion, it's not a political scoring, that what is a Uganda without Mr. Museveni? Mm-hmm. Kind of stuff. And all of us sometimes genuinely get worried, What is it that Garang falls, and all of a sudden there is nothing to hold? Some spirit has just come inside me and instructed me to refer to UPC. That Milton Obote falls. Somehow Mama Miria comes in and Olar, and sort of now, you guys, you must enjoy this, because this is how objective you can be. You genuinely see that you can't add up. That there are elements within and amongst yourselves that you simply cannot control. You can't sit down now and have a conversation, a commonsensical conversation. South Sudanese are massively educated. South Sudanese refugees, Judith, made huge amount of opportunities during the early part of the liberation struggles. And they were massively privileged and gifted and given opportunity, particularly by the global North nation states, like what the Somalis actually did. These guys are big in different places. Why are they so absent in the political Juba? Now, thinking ball, as Dr. Ojiambo was saying, I said, is it only ball? My poor favorite, that's a fact, is Dr. Riek Machar. I just can't believe that that what may be a Machar government and being given authority as president would not be able to have it. But of course, some people who are ideologically taken up and believe that Salva Kiir can be driven like Moses Ali, You rather drag him like Moses Ali, but he's still our power and authority. But it's failed. Early this year, I met Rebecca Garang. That lady is smooth. That lady is composed. That lady is decent. That lady is what Nigerians would say presidential material. So basically, what is it that sort of these people are so stuck, and you can see the mess going on? And I was thinking, and the reason why I thought about it, when these guys meet as cabinet, what is it that they do? What is it that this guy called Salva Kiir has held this guy so much hostage? But how is it that these people, and I say many of these people have been our friends for a very long time, that they don't see that it's some kind of grazing kraal, but a kraal of boys fighting after smoking weed, in a grazing place. It is difficult. Look, I don't know. I've just bored you down there. What is unfortunate is the fact that the body that should be able to sort out South Sudan, regional neighbors. There is no reason why a nation state like South Sudan should exist when there is a country like Kenya. There is no reason why South Sudan should be like that without their leaders being whipped if they're being silly when there is a country called Ethiopia and a country called Sudan. Granted, they had their own historical thing, but very massively interested, and Sudan made net contribution initially to the stability of South Sudan. To their credit, I even nearly changed my mind about some opinion about some of their leaders. And this nation state called the Republic of Uganda. But guess what? All these 4 nation states are seemingly interests to pull and push for their own selfish interests rather than anything else. The next thing would be East African Community. I know we're short of time. East African Community as a body. East African Community, as we've discussed here, if it was a viable nation, regional body that operates within their systems where legislators like George do say instruct, and summits do, South Sudan would possibly be temporarily occupied. And then finally, where's the global African Union? African curse is manifesting itself at the best in South Sudan. It's a tragedy.
Thank you. So, Major, again, I want your security perspective on this. To become a general, certainly someone has to work really hard. You're a major. You earned that title through a lot of work you put in.
He's more than a major.
Yes. But Ball was general, so that's the highest rank in the military. So certainly he really worked so hard. And in just a matter of hours, having him stripped from that rank to private, that's such a profound humiliation and a huge insult to somebody. If you are to be in his shoes, certainly, I mean, no one wants to be in that position. But then does such a move carry some security implications or threats that could perhaps plunge South Sudan into a bigger crisis than it is already in?
Well, I think it does. First of all, I must start by a disclaimer that my knowledge about South Sudan is not so grounded. So I comment about South Sudan on the general principles of statehood or international relations that I know. So I would restrain myself from hearsay. So I don't know much about South Sudan, although they are neighbors, I've been with them. So, but in any particular question, you see, South Sudan has not yet developed such a strong state. A strong state in terms of the police, the military, the courts of law, and other institutions, including human rights, national human rights institutions like Human Rights Commission. I know there were attempts by Uganda Human Rights Commission to help them develop theirs. Similarly, so many people have been experts, including former Lanya Jacob. Lanya Jacob was there as an expert in legislative development, strengthening the legislation. So they are really still weak. So they are weak both in terms of infrastructure and superstructure. Infrastructure in a sense that roads and airports and all that, but superstructure in a sense of institutions, including software institutions like what I've mentioned, human rights institution. So a general who has been demoted can easily form a rebel group. Very simple in South Sudan. It's a matter of getting a few supporters and they declare themselves whatever they like to use in their acronyms. They don't forget to put liberation or movement. So in South Sudan, liberation movement, something that they can even call it one. The other one is one, this is two. Then you really see it. So it is possible that this general can do it. But normally a general rank is a rank that is supposed to be given to a befitting person in terms of military training that you have had and in terms of the command that you have consistently shown your command to or administrative capacity. Incidentally, as you become a general, you become more civil because your training and your composure is more into encompassing civil competency. And that's why many of them make good ambassadors and all that. But of course, in some circumstances, it is opportunistic, and some people are given generals when they really don't feel the competency. So that is also danger. But to your question, this is security risk. This man can tomorrow form the South Sudan Liberation Movement 1 or 2, and it is really something to sort out. Now, I go back to the statehood. You see, we had a situation in Rwanda where Bierimana presumably had an average superstructure in terms of courts and police and all that, and laws, although their laws was weak because, for example, you had clear discrimination in their national ID, a Hutu and a Tutsi. Your national ID would show that. But the other things were there. So when they nearly went to zero, possibly they took advantage of the strong man type in the name of our old boy, Paul Kagame, the great OB of Ontari School. They really picked up. They seem to see that there's a presence of the state which can give law and order, which can give discipline. No battalion, no brigade can be in a corner of Rwanda and they do their thing, which is very common in South Sudan. A unit can do their own thing, and a general can do his own thing. Even while we cry in Kampala, there are so many convoys with wheel. The other ones are actually convoy of your own. This one, at least it is given by police. The other one is your own convoy. So we yet to see a organization of a strong centralized state that happened in Rwanda from the scratch to South Sudan. And this brings me, I know this time, to my last comment about the build up of sovereignty. Even under UN, we have such an emerging sovereign states that even East African community, I'm not yet sure the legal avenue for which it will take police to police South Sudan. You don't. They are sovereign states. If you try to do that, you're interfering into the internal affairs of the country. So the vagueness of sovereignty, both at global level, even at regional level, leaves us nearly to pray to God that nothing wrong will happen, to God that they will wake up and understand, to God that there will no bloodshed. But in the institutional framework, even the so-called standby force of East Africa, it looks like the intention is to fight those fighting East Africa, not to maintain the internal peace system in a country, such that you'd still have genocide in South Sudan, and generally you are around and about and within and among, and you don't see the legal loophole to you. Do you send police to police there? Do you go and rule in their courts? Do you appoint judges? Do you arrest and prosecute?
Too
It's
many
vague.
loopholes, yes.
Yes, vague. So we have such a loophole, and all this loophole is built around the sovereign state, the 193 in the UN, and the 8, how many in East Africa now?
We're 8.
8, and the 54 in Africa. The African Union is looking at its 54 sovereign states, and East Africa is looking at its own sovereign states. You really don't see what you can do.
Thank you. You wanted to say something, and then I'll give each of you just a minute to just give us some concise takeaway message that you can leave the viewers with.
Yeah, but
you wanted to add.
Comrade, which really raises a very important point, because you see, what is happening in South Sudan would definitely attract the intervention of the EAC directly, but because of the legal loopholes, you see, the treaty preserves sovereignty of partner states. That's why you will find that something happens in a specific partner state and you don't see a direct intervention of the EAC because they are shielded by the principle of sovereignty. So sovereignty preserves these partner states and allows them to conduct their internal business. The moment you come in there,
you're undermining
you
that
are undermining.
sovereignty.
I was being asked about recently, just about the two Kenyans who had been who
Who were abducted and later released.
were released recently from custody here in Uganda. And I said, you see, partner states by our treaty are sovereign. So the conduct of the elections is a sovereign matter. So you do not go and interfere in the choices of another partner state. That would be seen as interference. So until we begin, and that's the kind of conversation that we have been encouraging in the new constitution that is being made for the confederation, so that we from our own experience we can then say these are some of the areas that we require recalibration of the law, so that we can now find a way in which, if we are really integrating, then what is happening in South Sudan is a matter that we should all be concerned, because we know where it's going to end. State institutions in South Sudan are incapable, very incapable. You see, one of the conditions for integration, for example, for EAC integration, is that you have to build states that mirror the institutions of the EAC. Because the EAC, as it is now, does not operate a government. It depends on governments of these partner states. So you must have institutions to implement them. So if we pass a law, there must be an institution within the partner state to implement. But in South Sudan, we do not have those institutions. You know, so even when we are doing the, for example, you know, under our EAC Customs Management Act, you must have a customs law, and that customs law is what governs the collection of customs revenue and management of really cross-border trade. But we have had to go an extra mile to make sure that South Sudan, first of all, has a law. South Sudan has not yet, even as we speak right now, has not yet acceded to the treaty. Yes, the treaty was the president assented to it, to say we are joining the EAC, but it has to, according to the law, it has to come back
to the EAC,
to the Parliament of South Sudan, as an act.
So they haven't.
They haven't. So even now, you cannot.
So does that mean they? So what's the legal dilemma here when it comes to their existence in the EAC? Does it mean they are existing? What is the legal status? Because if their own parliament has not endorsed this, then that certainly creates a question of, is South Sudan a member of the EAC legally or not? That's
a matter that the lawyers will
That's
deal
a very
with.
interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
But we just have a minute. Yeah.
So really, that's the state of South Sudan. At the moment, it does not have strong institutions, and internally they're having contradictions, that they have not resolved ever since the death of John Garang.
Yes.
So they are so factionalized. And there are still two tendencies, like Dr. Jambo here talked about. There are two tendencies. Those that are aligned to the Arabic Northern Sudan, and those that are so much on the Christian side. So those are the tensions that exist.
Thank you. So I'm just giving you 30 seconds or 1 minute each to just give us a concise takeaway message from our discussion today. Dr. Ojiambo, I'll start with you.
Yeah, we started with elections, and I think, and I've always argued that elections still remain the best way of determining who can lead us for now in Uganda. So they should be handled in a manner that does not affect any party. We want elections to be peaceful, with a very honest and independent electoral commission, and the other players, the politicians, the candidates. We need a situation where we are peaceful, and at the end of the day, we may not get an agreeable candidate who has been elected, but at least a candidate who has come out of the process. And therefore, the police and the other institutions need to act carefully. My view is that police is becoming very violent in Uganda. In fact, the human rights measurement now think that they have even surpassed the army in many things that they do. For South Sudan, I really feel that if it was a company, it has reached a time when there is need for dissolution. Otherwise, people cannot continue dying because this ball thing may end up into another crisis. So many people are going to suffer and die. There's need to get a solution. And East Africa, though Vegas, my colleagues have said, at least they should leave these people to fight and then sort out themselves.
Okay, thank you. Joseph, sorry, George.
We need a peaceful election. Violence is not good for our democracy. It's not good for our governance. So we should desist from any acts of violence in our elections so that we have a legitimate choice, that the people are free to exercise their right to vote. We have no other measure of legitimacy in our other than through an election. So we should allow these elections to be free, fair, without any violence. So all the actors, this is my plea. As for South Sudan needs to quickly reorganize themselves. They must build a national consensus. So there has got to be some intense conversations across the different power centers, be it ethnic power centers, be it political, military, or cultural, or religious. All these power centers should come into a conversation so that they have a national consensus that leads them to an election, so that they have an election, imperfect as it may, is a better way to determine who leads than through imposing using military means.
Thank you. Joseph.
As far as election is concerned, we should have a free, fair, and open and peaceful elections with an outcome which is reflective of the views and opinions of the peoples of this country. Already, thanks to the hemorrhage in the judicial system, UPC has been denied a candidate, and so therefore Uganda has been denied the most authentic alternative programs that would otherwise have challenged NRA, and has not happened. And so NRA should be able to enjoy the fact that they've been led to get away with quite a huge amount without a clear political challenge. So the best they can do is to make sure that everything else goes on reasonably well. But in any case, my colleagues already said that they've got sufficient reasonable points enough for them not to go through the extremes of using institutions, particularly security, to go to the extremes. And overzealous guys in the security services should be able to restrain themselves. As far as South Sudan is concerned, I know it's a concluding remark, but you need to know that when Tanzania and UPC forces were launching to fight Idi Amin, ironically, the African Union said that Uganda is a sovereign state. This is something that Ugandans need to know. Actually, Tanzania was opposed, by the rest of the African nation states that were interfering. I think this is a political matter, and I think it's long overdue that African states, African Union, and regional communities need to be able to intervene. In fact, on the South Sudanese issue, it's not a legal matter; it's a political matter. They took a political decision to break away. There was a political decision to bring in the East African community, South Sudan to East African community. But I'm generally quite surprised. I know you're time bad. Generally quite surprised that South Sudan state is as it is, that the accession process is as much a limbo as it is. The more reason why political leaders in this election time, George, we need to have leaders who are able to bang the table, because this is not a South Sudan thing, it's not a Ugandan thing, it's an African thing, and we're basically a laughing stock for the rest of the world.
Thank you, Thank you, Joseph. Major.
Thank you so much. I think I'm good at concluding.
You are.
Like me.
Good at concluding.
Good man.
I don't generate, but he starts to generate a debate about UPC being denied a candidate. That should not come, because we know we would have no right of reply.
Context of conclusion.
So, but on issue on violence, there's no place for violence, should be condemned. Violence during campaign and violence during voting. And as far as we are concerned, violence works against us. So we stand against violence. I stand against violence and my party stands against violence. On South Sudan, I think the nearest place of call is East Africa. East Africa needs to come up with a position, either a subcommittee on Sudan, which they will have also to persuade African Union to give them mandate, and also persuade UN Security Council to give them mandate and support, so that this becomes a binding body or unit that should actually work with the government of Sudan and can help to align it. Where there's a problem, there's a solution. Only that our head would not have thought about it. Even HIV/AIDS has medicine, but our mind has not clicked. So East Africa is the first place of call. They should generate a consensus from African Union and UN to give them mandate. A subcommittee should be set to work on South Sudan.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Robert Ojiambo, Honorable George Stephen Odongo, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, and you, retired Major with Pollar, for your insights on our discussion today on the violence against N.U.P supporters in Mbarara and generally campaign violence across the board, and also the crisis in South Sudan. My name is Judith Atim. This is the Citizens Chat Show. Thank you very much for watching. Drop us a comment in the comment section, and also to join us again next week, same time. It's bye-bye from all of us here.